My guess is we're going to do inverse operations in a very specific order, so you should probably pay attention because you need to know this. It's great.
Okay, welcome back to YouTube with Lubowski. Hopefully you've seen some of my other one-step equation videos before you want to move on to two-step equations. But today we're going to be focusing on two-step equations, which means there are going to be just two steps to solve the equation for whatever the variable is. Now, we always want to make sure that we've got that equal sign because you can't solve it unless it is an equation, not an expression. And so all of these are equations. So we're going to take this one step at a time. Our first step is always to move our addition or subtraction away from the variable. So in a lot of cases, you're going to have a constant. You're going to have just a number that's attached to the variable. So we've got 5n, and then we've got the plus 5. So doing equations, we're actually going to work our way backwards. We are going to get rid of addition and subtraction first, and then we're going to go on to multiplication and division. And so this first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of that 5. And when I say get rid, I really mean that I am going to just move it away from the variable because our goal is to isolate that n and get it by itself. So what I do to one side of my equation, I have to do to the other. So I'm going to do the opposite of plus 5, which is minus 5. And that 5 has to go somewhere, so I'm going to put it on the other side. So I'm going to subtract 5 from the other side. So once I do that, I get 45 minus 5 is 40. I'm going to drop my equal sign down, and then my plus 5 minus 5 is gone, and I'm going to drop down my 5n. And give me a second. I've got a crazy dog trying to get outside. I like to pretend that I can just keep on going through that, but when you've got a husky barking at you, you kind of got to take a second to make sure that they don't lose their mind. All right, so once we get rid of that, once we move that plus 5, then all that we're left with is 5 times n. Now, if I'm trying to look for what times 5 equals 40, I'm going to do the inverse operation. So I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to actually divide 40 by 5. And what I do to one side, I do to the other. Anything divided by itself is 1. So I'm left with just my 1n on the left. And on the right, 40 divided by 5 is 8. So that means that 5 times 8 equals 40. So whenever I'm trying to figure out a missing piece, I'm just going to do the inverse operation to figure that out. When it's a two-step problem, that's when it ends up getting a little bit messier. So step 1, we did our moving addition or subtraction away from the variable. And then step 2 is move the coefficient or fraction away by multiplying or dividing, whichever one that we have. So let's try that with the next one. So before I touch the y, before I do anything with that y, I want to get rid of my addition or subtraction first. So I've got plus 3 going on. So to do the inverse operation, I'm going to add 3 to both sides. Now this one's a little bit trickier. If you have a calculator, you'll be fine with this. But if I have negative 11 plus 3, opposite signs in addition mean that I have to do the opposite. So I'm going to do 11 minus 3, which is 8. But I had more negatives, so my answer is negative 8. And then what am I left with on this side? I'm still left with y over 6. Now in previous videos, I showed you a couple of different ways you can do this. Y over 6 is the same as 1/6 times y, which equals negative 8. So we can multiply by the inverse, which is 6 over 1. But what I did to one side, I have to do to the other. So I'm going to multiply this side by 6 over 1. And the 6's simplify and the 1 simplify, so I end up with 1y equals, and then for multiplication, I'm going to multiply straight across, so negative 8 times 6 is negative 48. And since I have 1's on the bottom, it's just a whole number, negative 48. The other option we have to do when we've got this y wrapped up in this division problem is we can actually do cross products. So if I put my negative 8 over 1, I've got proportional relationships. So I'm going to multiply. I'm going to do y times 1 is y, and then 6 times negative 8 is negative 48. So again, the answer is still the same. I personally like cross products. I think it goes a little bit faster. But if you want to multiply by the reciprocal on both sides, you can also do that to get rid of those fractions. Number 3 is a little bit unique because the first thing we need to do is we need to distribute that 4 to get all my terms before I start moving anything. So 4 times g is 4g minus 4 times 1 is 4 equals 24. So once I've distributed everything, now I can start isolating my g variable. If I have a minus 4, I'm going to add 4 over to the other side to move it away from the variable. I'm left with 4g, the 4's cancel, equals 28. And then to get that coefficient away, if it's 4 times g, we're going to do the inverse, which is divide by 4 on both sides. That simplifies to g equals 28 divided by 4 is 7. All right, number 4. Number 4 is a little bit of a tricky situation because we've got this really big mess of stuff. And so we can't actually we can still do cross products for this. So I'm going to create my cross product. So I'm going to put it over 1, and I'm going to multiply. So 1 times v plus 9, 1 times all of this is still just v plus 9, equals 15 times 0 is 0. So I'm going to subtract 9 from both sides, and I end up with v equals negative 9. Now if I plug that back in, negative 9 plus 9 is 0. 0 divided by anything is still 0, so that does end up working. But the cross product method makes it go by really, really quick. All right, I am going to do number 7 and number 9 with you. Ooh, and number 10, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and do number 10 as well because those ones are the trickiest ones. I'm going to leave 5 for you to do. I'm going to leave 6 for you to do and 8 for you to do. But let's go ahead and do number 7. So again, this problem, because we've got the variable wrapped up in that fraction, I'm going to go ahead and create a proportion and do cross products with it. So 1 times w minus 14. 1 times all of this is still just w minus 14 equals 13 times 2 is 26. Now I can start solving it. So if it's minus 14 attached to the variable, I'm going to add 14 to both sides. That simplifies to 0, and I'm left with my w equals 40. All right, number 9. So number 9, I'm going to start. I see that b is wrapped up in a fraction, but I have to get rid of the negative 11 first. So I'm going to do the opposite. So the opposite of negative 11 is positive 11 or add 11. I'm always trying to zero that out. So I'm going to move that to the other side. And we mentioned this before if you're not using a calculator. When the signs are the opposite, we do the opposite. So 11 minus 9 is 2. And because there were more positives than there were negatives, it's a positive 2. Equals. And we still have b over 8. And again, I'm telling you, for me, we could multiply by the reciprocal, but I love just dropping that 1 underneath it and doing cross products. 1 times b is b, 1b. And then 2 times 8 is 16. Boom, done. It's as simple as that, which that's why cross products is one of my favorite things. And I actually didn't even learn cross products. I I don't remember learning cross products until I taught math. So that's a pretty cool thing to understand. Now, number 10 is a unique situation because I have a q on both sides of the equation. And that's okay because just like adding 10 plus a number, I can actually do that with the terms like the q's, like we did in our expressions video where we combine like terms. If I want to get all of the q's on one side and all of the numbers on the other, I'm going to start by doing the opposite to move my q's over to the right hand side. It doesn't matter which direction you go, but I'm going to that's the one move that I can do, put it over on the other side so the 10 is separated from the q's. So the opposite of positive 2q is subtract 2q from both sides of the equation. And I want you to watch how this works. So anything minus itself zeroes out, gone. I'm left with a positive 10 on the left side. Now on this side, I'm saying right now that I have 7 q's. That's q plus q plus q plus q plus q plus q plus q. And I want to take away 2 of those q's. So if I take away 2 q's, I'm left with 5 q's. Now I wanted to show you why it works, but here's what's so easy about this. We just have to do 7 minus 2 is 5, and we're left with 5q. We keep the variable the same. So my final step here is to get rid of that coefficient. 5 times q, I'm going to divide by 5 to undo that and try and figure out what times 5 equals 10. So that is simplified to 1q on that right hand side. Again, it doesn't matter what side it's on. 10 divided by 5 is 2, and that finishes off our problem for that one. And if I plug it back in, that ends up being 2 times 2 plus 10. So that's 4 plus 10 equals 14. And then if you do it on this side, 7 times 2 equals 14. So does 14 equal 14? Absolutely. That's just a way to plug it back in and check your problem. You always want to check your answer with the original. So even though it's all marked up, you want to rewrite the original equation that you were given, and you want to plug that q value in. So I want you to go ahead and take a minute to pause the video, and I want you to try doing questions 5, 6, and 8 on your own. And remember, if this was a little confusing, don't hesitate to go ahead and print the page off again or rewrite the problem out and try going over it again with me. With these 2-step equations, you always want to check for addition and subtraction, and then you want to do the multiplication and division, but we take it just one step at a time. So go ahead and pause and try 5, 6, and 8 on your own. I will give you a second, and when you hit unpause, you'll see the answers within a few seconds on the video that you can check your work. Okay, so looking at number 5, 6, and 8, you should have done those on your own. So looking at number 5, the first thing we did was subtract the 8 from both sides, and then we divided by 12 to figure out that x equals -4. For number 6, we had to add 3 to both sides, and then we divided by -2 on both sides to get p equals 8 because those negatives did cancel out. And make sure that you are not losing the negatives because even one lost negative will end up costing you the correct answer. In our final problem, number 8, we subtracted 1 from both sides and then divided by 7 to finish off the problem with a equals 5. Don't forget to ask questions from me or your teacher, depending on who you are watching this video, and good luck with the rest of the problems.
2-step, a 2-step. Did you do 2-step? Did you do 2-step? 2-step, 2-step. I have no shame. I'm okay with myself. And honestly, I think I get more enjoyment out of this than you do. If you heard my dog crying, I promise I'm not doing anything to him. He's just in the other room and he's very upset and sad that he's not by my side.